Good morning. As we focus on our conference to end stigma and discrimination, the role of faith and faith communities, we want to begin in our tradition of reflection. And with me is Reverend Dr. Pauline Wanjiru from World Council of Churches, East Africa region, and I'm Canon Gideon Baguma Byamgisha from Uganda, the first religious leader in Africa to disclose his HIV status as public in 1992, and have been at the forefront with you, supporting your campaign to make sure that we end stigma and discrimination so that we can end AIDS. We have to make sure that that is kept in mind, that we must end the inequality of access to freedom from stigma and discrimination. So that, now we want to begin with the, I hope someone is screening for us. The introductory prayer begins with a hymn. Pauline, if you can come here, I want people to see what you are wearing. Faith communities, to get our campaign of putting 12 million people on care and treatment, the faith communities, the churches, the congregations, the mosques, the temples, have two types of work to do. One, to make sure that this side is up, safe practices, access and adherence to treatment, voluntary counseling and testing that is stigma-free, and empowering those most at risk, those most vulnerable. So those have to increase in our congregations. And this side on the left has to be defeated so that we have zero stigma, zero shame, zero denial, zero discrimination, zero inaction, and misaction. Misaction is a very potent in the faith communities when we do all we can and put on, but we achieve different goals. So that is the assignment. If you say, how do we reach zero infection, zero death? You multiply, save, you reduce, seed. And it is we got something because most faithfuls don't read. They hear their theology, they listen to their theology and their spirituality. So we sing the theology, we sing the spirituality, we sing the action. And it says, what can defeat AIDS? Nothing but a comprehensive response. Multiplying YESA, and that is YESA is youth empowerment, skilling and accompaniment. From World Council of Churches, we learn that accompaniment is critical, and multiplying, save, and reducing seeding. We've explained that. And then I teach you a small chorus that goes with the song. You just sing with me, and I see how quick you are in class. It says, oh, precious is the truth that treats, prevents, and hopes in God. Nothing else that we know, nothing but a comprehensive response. Huh? Yes. So let's go one line with me. Oh, precious is the truth.
Oh, precious is the truth.
That treats, prevents, and hopes in God. Nothing else that we know. Nothing but a comprehensive response. Amen. You got it. You got it. So let's Pauline now lead us in the scripture.
The reading
is taken from the Gospel according to St. Luke, chapter 10, verse 25 to 37. On one occasion, an expert in the law stood up to test Jesus. "Teacher," the law expert asked Jesus, "what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus replied, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" The law expert answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." "You have answered correctly," Jesus replied. "Do this, and you will live." But the law expert wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, beat him, and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed by on the other side. So too, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring an oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. "Look after him," he said, "and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have." Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law replied, "The one who had mercy on him." Jesus told him, "Go and do likewise." This is the word of God.
Take a minute to reflect on what you have heard from your angle of faith. This parable told by Jesus, who is described, interpreted, and revered differently by many faith and philosophy traditions as a great philosopher, great rabbi, great prophet, peace be upon him, great spiritual guru, or, like in my tradition, God Emmanuel. This parable is challenging for many of us leaders, many ordinary people, and for many congregations of various faith traditions and persuasions. It's a challenge, theologically, ethically, spiritually, pastorally, and even prophetically, that I believe has an enduring value as we seek to overcome our own HIV service access inequalities, injustices, and barriers to ensure that the 12 million people who are still missing on the care sheet, on the treatment roll, are put on treatment, but only not being put there, but also adhering and keeping there until their HIV viral load is undetectable fast, but also continuously. It's a good story to reflect on our barriers to youth empowerment, skilling and accompaniment, like I have said, the SAVE, those 4 variables in SAVE, safe behaviors and practices. You can't adopt safe behaviors and practices if you are still stigmatized, shamed, and excluded. That's what Jesus was saying. Who is my neighbor? The one who needs services most. Jesus tells the law expert, love your neighbor or neighbors, and by neighbors we mean those likable and not so likable, known and strange, near and far. And recently, as the climate challenges tell us, again, our neighbor includes non-human creation. They are also our neighbors. Give due attention to your neighbor's health with the same urgency, same depth, and same tenacity that you give to your own health. Pray and fast, work and advocate for your neighbor's peace and dignity, longevity and fulfillment, like you are praying and fasting, working and advocating for your own peace, for your own dignity, for your own longevity and fulfillment. In other words, whatever theological, ethical, pastoral, spiritual, or prophetic action you and I choose to take towards or around or for our neighbor, we should make sure its underlying motive is pure, non-self-righteous, non-selfish, non-self-centered love. And likewise, our neighbor is commanded to lovingly think and feel, lovingly be and do the same towards us. This divine overall arching command, I think, fails mostly because when I do my part, my neighbor doesn't do what? Their part. Or when their neighbor does their part, I don't fulfill my part. But if we together can feel for the other, compassionately look at the other as they are loving and compassionately looking at me, that synergy, that harmonized thinking, praying, and fasting would produce fruit. So in case you have been wondering why we are not yet there, you know that it is because either we have self-righteous neighbors this side, or we have self-centered neighbors this side, and the middle where we are supposed to care and love for each other and overcome inequality and injustice that denies us freedom from stigma, freedom from discrimination, freedom from exclusion. That love is not yet in amounts that the statisticians call statistically significant. Coming out of our dialogue and renewed commitment this week, we shall make from our discussions and group work. May we see more, one, awareness raising on the imperative of relational theology and spirituality, relational ethics and advocacy. I can see Professor John smiling because that's the work he does in his combined course, the double masters he offers, to make sure that we get more graduates, more prophets, more leaders that have this love thy neighbor basis of action, of thinking, of reflection. We need that for my country too, as you know. Number two, we should see more love birthed or produced, produced partnerships and alliances, love-guided accompaniments, and love-sustained engagements with the most stigma and discrimination at risk. This could be persons, this could be families, this could be by gender, this could be by sexuality, this could be by political persuasion or cultural identity. There are so many excuses that we deny love to people because of these various. But we hope that this consultation, this pre-conference, can produce more medicine around these two And also, finally, the data and more evidence collected. Can we have that commitment that we have data that is community-led? We have had data, but it's from the people who are power over. But we need data from power with, that the most at-risk persons are the ones telling us, now I feel better. Now, yes, now you've done it well. Now I can access more safe behaviors. I can access more access to treatment. I can voluntarily test and declare my status, to those who need to know for their own protection. Oh, now I feel I can join any empowerment center or institute without fear or without danger of being violated against. We need to ensure that our love for neighbor as self is much more than sentimentality. I was reading a book on friendship, the ethics of friendship, and the reader was saying people don't take seriously in philosophy. They no longer take seriously that idea of friendship. And the author was saying, no, we really need to bring back the issue of friendship, but not in sentimental terms, but in practical terms, so that we can see love in socially, economically equitable relationships. We can see love in politically and legislative justice. In Uganda, I have been very passionate about saying, okay, you have this law on deliberate transmission. Deliberate transmission, someone should be punished. Yeah, surely, yes. But there is something missing in the law. Part B, where is deliberate acquisition? If you are punishing the one who is deliberately giving, why aren't you punishing the one who is deliberately receiving? So if that is difficult, then scrap the law. Because at least we have, defilement has its laws, rape has laws. So if you can't bring justice in the law, if you can't make sure that the one who has the virus is justly addressed, and the one who is at risk is also justly addressed, if that is difficult, suspend the law until you get the right language. Amen? Yes. So that's what morally empathic legislation is about. And so that we have zero tolerance to self-righteousness, self-righteous oppression and abuse. These days, we are being more attuned to the word spiritual abuse. It's becoming more common. We are becoming aware, okay, that was abuse. Yes, when people harass us because of who we are, or what we stand for, and we are either morally or spiritually or physically in abuse. So let me end there, and I call Pauline to summarize.
Let us take one moment. Imagine that you are the neighbor who was attacked by robbers and left for dead. What would you like the passers-by to do? What religion and faith stereotypes about others are we being called to subvert in our ending inequalities, ending stigma and discrimination, ending AIDS campaign context? What are those stereotypes rooted in? Are they rooted in bias and bigotry towards a different gender, race, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, education, economic status, or some other category? What stereotypes about those different from you or us have you found to be staggeringly untrue? How does the ethic of love of the neighbor call us to transgress our faith, our cultural and legislative boundaries of us and them? Dear Lord, we pray that you may help us for a moment to imagine we are the neighbor needing love and care. We are the neighbor who is helpless and left for dead, so that you may hasten our hearts, our feet, our action towards the right direction in ending AIDS, so that you may hasten our advocacy skills, the use of our resources, the use of our powers to hasten the end of AIDS campaign. In the name of God, our Creator, God, our Redeemer, God, our Sustainer. Amen.
Good morning. And good day to those of us joining from all over the world in many different time zones. I am Dr. Ulysses Burley III, founder of UB The Cure LLC, a US-based organization that operates at the intersection of faith, health, and human rights. I currently serve as project director of the HIV Vaccine Trials Network Faith Initiative, which I look forward to sharing more about during our time together this week. On behalf of the Interfaith Health Platform and the 2022 Interfaith Preconference Organizing Committee, it's my pleasure to welcome you to Montreal, where we have gathered to take action to overcome HIV stigma and discrimination. It's appropriate that we've reunited in Montreal, given the city's earliest beginnings were as a missionary center founded by French explorer Paul de Chaumedet. Upon settling in the region, the first public structures that he built were a chapel, a hospital, and a school that was run by a society of priests. Faith, health, and education are at the foundation for which this great city was established. And here we are, nearly 400 years later, assembled with faith, health, and education at the forefront of our agenda. A lot has changed about the world since many of us were in Amsterdam 4 years ago. What remains the same, however, is the urgent need to quickly and effectively respond to an HIV and AIDS epidemic entering its 41st year in the midst of a surging global COVID-19 pandemic and an emerging public health crisis in monkeypox. What also remains clear is that we cannot end the HIV epidemic without the prominent involvement of interfaith communities. That's why we're here today. That's why we have journeyed from near and far, navigating the challenges of travel amid competing and intersecting safety and health concerns. It's why some of you will join us virtually in the wee hours of the night, because we understand what's at stake and the consequences of inaction. And so we act. We take action, we activate our activism for the promise of a better future. There are many persons and organizations responsible for our being here today, and while it would take all morning to acknowledge all of them, I do want to extend gratitude to some. First and foremost, to UNAIDS and PEPFAR for your continued support of this critical work at the nexus of faith and HIV. Without your commitment, none of this would be possible. I also want to thank our other global partners, including but not limited to WHO, the Clinton Health Access Initiative, and the Global Fund. We are grateful to have key populations represented on the organizing committee and throughout our program that you'll see reflected in the 3 tracks of workshops submitted and presented from all over the world. Our 2020 all-virtual event highlighted the power of connectivity and informed our planning for this pre-conference to be able to offer a fully integrated hybrid experience. So we give thanks for technology as well this morning. Finally, I want to celebrate the presence of HIV activist and mother of HIV pioneer Ryan White, Miss Jeannie White, who we look forward to hearing from this morning. The objectives of our event can be found on the Interfaith Health platform, along with the 12 Million campaign to promote access to health services to the 12 million children, women, and men living with HIV who are not yet on antiretroviral treatment. We encourage you to sign on to the campaign if you haven't done so already and share with your networks. The organizing committee is here to assist you over these next 2 days, so please don't hesitate to engage us if needed. Again, thank you for your presence, and welcome to the AIDS 2022 Interfaith Pre-Conference.
You can see me here. That means that we are almost beginning the session. And I would like to thank each and every one of you for coming here. And it's been a long time coming, isn't it? Most of the time we've been meeting online and having virtual sessions. So today we are here physically. Just turn to your neighbor and make sure you have the face to the name. Are you sitting with the right person? Do you know the person you're sitting next to? I know we've been meeting online most of the time, so make sure you know the person you're sitting next to, yeah? So I'd like to thank Canon Reverend Gideon and Reverend Pauline, for the session we've just had. It's been more than just a session, it's been a reflective session on what we've been doing for the very many years. And the word of the day from Reverend Canon Gideon is healing and accompaniment. So we'll be having a number of word of the days today, yeah? So just have that written down so that you can remember. Healing and accompaniment. It's a new word for the day, yeah? And just to also thank Eustace for the very nice history of the place we are today. I didn't know it was a missionary center. That's something new. I know most of us didn't know that. And I would also like to just help us start this session. And because of time, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Brian Otieno. I'm from Alpha Jiri Network, Kenya. I run a youth network working with young people, integrating mental health into youth programs, and also working with faith communities to initiate dialogues and reduce stigma among young people living with HIV. And I'm also living positive, and I'm glad to be here just to change the narrative on HIV and becoming a committed member of the Faith Initiative platform for the very many years we've been working together. So it's been a long time coming since we met, as this was said. Dr. Eustace said that the last time we were in Amsterdam, and the conversation has been growing. 2020, we had a different conversation, and we've been having these conversations over and over again. And just looking how amazing everyone looks here. You all look beautiful. You look very gorgeous. The camera can lie. We've been meeting virtually, and the camera can really tell a lot. But I can see all of you here. You're looking amazing, yeah? So, yeah, without further much ado, I would like to invite our first speaker. And just having to introduce Matthew Kavanagh, the Deputy Executive Director and the Acting Interim Policy Advocacy and Knowledge in UNAIDS, to come and give us the first keynote address. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Good evening to those of you online. Good middle of the night to those of you who have gotten up very early. Distinguished leaders, activists, friends, let me send you greetings from everyone at UNAIDS. It's an honor to be here with you today to emphasize the crucial role of faith partners in the global AIDS response. The past 2 years have not been easy. But seeing the engagement of all of you here, especially the young people who are especially online, gives energy, opportunity, faith to all of us at UNAIDS. And it gives us hope about the future. And let us be clear, what we are looking ahead to is a future not just worrying, but a future that is likely to be full of pandemics. We are not heading into a world of no pandemics. We are heading right now into a world of multiple pandemics. And where that is true, our response has to be resilience, community, and advocacy. And that is what makes it so powerful to be in this room today. I'm going to share a few of the pieces that are going to come out in today's Global AIDS report with you, as long as you keep them quiet and embargoed. There's some really bad news, but there's also some very good news. And where the good news is coming, it's coming because we've built community, because we've built resiliency, because faith leaders have come together with community leaders, have come together with people living with HIV, and built the response that is able to respond in times of crisis. Unfortunately, the September 2020 predictions of then PEPFAR Global AIDS Coordinator and the Executive Director of UNAIDS in 2020, those predictions have actually come true. The COVID-19 pandemic has indeed moved us further off course to ending AIDS as a public health threat to 2030. Less than 2 years later, we not only see the impact of that pandemic, but of many other new and challenging realities. The new report that we will release shortly at 2:30 today, you all are invited to tune in online at unaids.org. It shows that in many communities, we are actually now seeing a reversal and a rise in HIV, in too many communities. It also shows, though, really remarkable progress in others. And so as we think about that, we have to think about kind of how we move. At the 2020 conference, we recommitted to joining the fight against AIDS together with any challenges and emergencies that came. And today, as we release this new report, that is going to be more necessary than ever. I want to thank everyone in this room and to the faith communities that have come together to input into the new global AIDS strategy. Your input was incredibly valuable. We know that people around the world heard your voices, supporting progressive and innovative approaches toward new global objectives. It was heard loud and clear in the UN General Assembly, and your voice mattered a lot. And so we thank you for that. I also want to applaud the dedication and commitment to the 12 million campaign. What you will hear, again, now I'm breaking news, which I'm going to get in trouble for, is that we've made progress. The gap is now 10 million people. And that is because of the concerted effort of people like you in this room, people like you who have tuned in online that have said, we can do this. I remember when the goal was 3 million people by 2005, and people looked at us as if we were crazy. And then I remember when the goal was 90, 90, 90, and people said, you care enough about people living with HIV that you want us to not only track whether they have access to ARVs, you want us to track whether or not they're working for them? To measure viral suppression? And we all said yes, actually. Now we move ahead into a reality that's got to be dedicated to a different focus, but a new focus. We have made remarkable progress in saying overall we refuse to accept that people can't have access. And we've gotten where we've gotten. And that is a remarkable reduction against a pandemic that has no vaccine and no cure. We are doing a thing that does not happen easily in human history. And that's where we are. As we look ahead, the continued support of faith leaders is just incredibly important on two fronts. One, that we tackle inequalities, and we're really serious about this. We've made remarkable progress by talking about overalls, right? The total number of people in various places, but we've also missed people. And so who are the people who have been missed and why? There's a reason. And that's what the inequality framework is about. Do we know that reason? Can we identify what people need and what we can give them to ensure that they have access? And two, that we approach a new vision of what pandemic response looks like, that tackles the inequalities that are, in fact, driving the AIDS pandemic. We know what to do. The question is, can we implement it? And I want to name 3 things. First off, Ken and Gideon talked about power with, which pretty much sets me up really well to be able to very easily say to you, this opportunity to work with brilliant, resourceful, creative, frontline communities, to reach even the hardest to reach people in the most at-risk communities, that is power with. And so let's respond to the Gideon's call and do that well. If we seize this moment brilliantly, we can turn the moment of crisis into a moment of opportunity by building community systems that are actually able to fill the gaps that medical systems often cannot. And I cannot overemphasize how critical it is to ensure that the community groups get the resources they need, the space they need, the opportunity to share their knowledge, and to play their role. We know that communities know the solutions. We just often don't listen. And so how do we get there? Second, we know how to treat HIV and prevent people from becoming infected. And so your work at driving the 12 million campaign and all of the other pieces that have moved have just been essential to say we demand that everyone has access to that. And third, we desperately need policies and laws that guarantee that everyone everywhere has the right to health. This has to include concerted efforts to remove stigma and discrimination, to dismantle the injustices and the inequalities that put children, young women and girls, gay men and other men who have sex with men, sex workers, transgender people, people who use drugs, prisoners, and migrants at greater risk of becoming infected and of dying. Here, this group is critical. I heard Ken and Gideon give me what I think is going to be my favorite line for the rest of the conference, which is statistically significant love. It's brilliant, right? And so I think that's our piece here. Can you all be that voice? UNAIDS is adopting a new, bolder strategy that says we are going to focus on law reform. We are going to focus on structural change. We're going to focus on getting access to treatment to those people who need it most. And we need you alongside us continuously, as you have been for so many years and so effectively. Let me just say that finally, we know that as we talk about inequalities, we have to be serious about what that looks like. And so our new report that'll come out shortly, one of the things that it has is an inequality lens. And it looks and it says, are there communities where the rich and the poor have equal access and equal viral suppression? And friends, I have good news, which is that in Eswatini, in Zimbabwe, and in Namibia, we can't detect a difference between the rich and the poor when it comes to viral suppression. That is remarkable. That is not true of anything else. If you look at childhood immunization, if you look at access to clean water, if you look at all of those things, we have not managed to do that. And in HIV, we have. But we haven't done that everywhere, friends. I named a few countries, and in other places, we haven't done that. And so our ask to you is that faith partners are critical. We need you because you are providers of HIV care. You are leaders in communities. In some areas, we know that faith leaders are the only providers of healthcare, and ensuring that services reach those left behind is left to faith communities. And so as community leaders, it's that social transformation, the fighting of inequality and stigma and discrimination, the campaign for compassion and justice, that's what's going to transform this access. And so let us take this opportunity to inspire each other. You inspire me. Let's also take this opportunity to go forward in action and in concrete action. I am so excited to hear what it is that you all will come out of this conference planning and doing, what activities will be done. Because if we do fight together and forge together that statistically significant love that the canon was bringing up, I am confident that we can actually get ourselves back on track, even amidst the massive crises we see today. We have been here before as the AIDS community. Crisis is not new, and with your support, we know that we can overcome them. Thank you all.
Thank you so much for that. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. Thank you so much for that, Matthew. And because we are a flexible, is it not enough? Yeah. We want to be flexible a bit. So before I invite the next speaker, I would like us to just have a minute to hear music from the North Coast main chorus. I hope that's ready. Yeah? It's an amazing team doing amazing work and inspirational work that they're doing. So let's give a minute for that. Thank you. Wow, that was amazing. We can do better than that. Yeah? Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. So I would like to invite our next speaker. Our next speaker is Sandy Thurman. She is the Chief Strategy Officer, U.S. Global AIDS Coordinator, and Health Diplomacy at PEPFAR. Thank you. Welcome. Help me welcome Sandy Thurman.
Good morning, everyone. So this is, oh, I love this in the background. This is good. What I really love about coming to this conference is that for the last 22 years of my life, Canon Gideon has taken my sermon and done it first, and Pauline, my good dear colleague. So I'm really excited about that. It's great to see you both and all of you friends and colleagues. I want to just start today because I really want to just echo what everyone else has said previously and thank Francesca and Ulysses for their extraordinary leadership in bringing us all together again. Bravo, team. And Yasik and the team from UNAIDS as well. It's just so wonderful to see everybody in person, and I know we are going to say that over and over through this conference. There are a couple of things that I want to focus on today. One is the topic that we're here yet again after all these 40 some odd years to talk about about stigma and discrimination and the challenges that presents for all of us who want to prevent, treat, and care for people with AIDS. And so this feels a little bit like Groundhog Day. For those of you who ever saw that classic movie, it's about going back and having the same thing happen over and over every single day. We still are having the same conversation, and I think that's an important note for us. But in doing that, I'm really excited about our keynote speaker today, and I know someone else will introduce her. But I am willing to bet that I am the only person in this room who was in the Capitol when Jeannie White Ginder came to the U.S. Capitol to advocate for an omnibus bill to provide prevention care and treatment services to people living with AIDS in the USA. It was quite an extraordinary event, and you all will hear the history, and she'll talk about it, I'm sure. But to talk about stigma and discrimination and have Jeannie with us today is, I'll get choked up when I talk about this, it's so extraordinarily important because the work that she did and that Ryan did was to actually put a face on HIV for all people in the world and all people in America, so that it wasn't the other that had HIV or was at risk for HIV, that it was all of us that were at risk in some way for HIV. It was a game changer that you almost had to be there to understand in the way that Americans and other people around the world understood what the AIDS epidemic was going to mean for us all. It was just extraordinary. What was more extraordinary, I think, was Jeannie's willingness to openly share the stigma and discrimination and hatred that she and her son and her family had experienced, to force all of us to look at our own biases and in ourselves and our traditions and our cultures about who was at risk and how we ought to respond to that risk. So today, we have what Matt has said to us. I'm so excited that you've given us the little skinny on the report this afternoon. What we know is we have made extraordinary progress, but that we have a long way to go before we end this epidemic. But we've learned some really great lessons that I hope we will employ. But one of the things, I want to go back to is that we've made great progress, and now, in many ways, we've come full circle. We're reaching our 90-90-90 goals, but now we're going to be back to where we began and having to focus on who is most at risk now and how we define those people and how we treat and care for them when it's not the generalized public, but it's the people often on the margins of our societies and our institutions, both and our individual biases that we have to reach out to. So we've done the easy part, people, And now we are back to doing the hard work right where we started in the earliest days of AIDS with Ryan and Jeannie and so many others. Now we, as leaders and communities and in faith institutions and academic institutions, John and my colleagues from Emory, we have to begin the conversation about this is the hard work, how we walk the walk and not just talk the talk about stigma and discrimination. What are those barriers that we have to get rid of and have to grapple with to help us move toward ending this epidemic as we know it in just a few short years. I think we can do that. It's time to have that conversation. I think coming out of the COVID, again, helps us. We've had a little time to reflect in these last 2 years. And so we ought to be in a better space coming out of this with respect to a little time to consider who we are and how we relate to others and how important these relationships are to us and to everyone else who we haven't yet reached. So I think this meeting couldn't come at a more opportune time. So I look forward to our discussions in the next couple of days. I want to thank you all for being here and to say how grateful I am to the organizers for bringing us all together today. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And because we know what's coming next, just to remind us that we are faith communities standing up for human rights. And when we mention human rights, what's the first word that comes in mind? Activism. So without further much ado, I would like to invite, and in a very special way, our keynote speaker, Ms. Jean White-Hidman. She's an activist and the mother of, do you know who that is? Do you know who that is? Yes, Ryan White. So thank you so much. Welcome. It's
Good morning, everybody. Thank you all so much for having me. My name is Jeannie White, and I'm the mother of Ryan White, but I also have a daughter, Andrea, who is with me today, who is very much a part of the story, but often left out of the story, because the focus was mostly on Ryan and I. I'm just a mom. I'm a mom just like every other mom. But because of a misunderstood disease called AIDS, my life changed overnight. It was not anything I thought I was going to have to worry about or experience, but in 1984, my son Ryan White was diagnosed with AIDS. He was one of the first children and first hemophiliacs to come down with AIDS. It was a new disease. It was fatal. People were scared. People were afraid that maybe kissing, tears, sweat, and so on might spread AIDS. People thought that maybe fleas and mosquitoes might transmit AIDS. We've come a long way in this AIDS epidemic, but it was horrific for the people that were first diagnosed with AIDS. The discrimination, fear, and panic that surrounded this disease was horrible. The stigma that was given to people and thinking that people deserved it, and blame people. I can remember people thinking in some of the criticisms we got that people would say that she's a front for the gay community. That's what she is, trying to discredit me. And it was like, what?
And she's had to done something bad, or he's done something bad, or that kid wouldn't have AIDS. And I would try to explain to people that he got it from his factor used to treat his hemophilia. Ryan's story started when he was first born. He was born with severe hemophilia. He had less than 1% clotting, so he took a medicine called Factor VIII, which contains the clotting agent found in blood. And we dealt with hemophilia. We did not seem to think it was a handicap, so to speak. He had to have 2 IVs a week. We thought it was a miracle drug. We really did. If he had a bad bleed or a hemorrhage in his knee or joints, we would give him more. I would give him sometimes three doses of factor. But all this was made from blood. As we know, the blood was not checked back then. And over 8,000 hemophiliacs were infected with AIDS, but Ryan just happened to be one of the very first. So the drug that we thought was saving his life all these years ended up kind of being the drug that took his life because it contained the HIV virus. But we didn't know at that time. When Ryan was first, 1984, I'll start there, he was sick the whole year. He was 12 years old, and he was sick. I took him to the doctor all the time. They kept saying, well, there's a lot of colds and flu going around. It seemed like he got a little bit better, and it seemed like he got sick again. So the end of November came, we went to hemophilia clinic, and Ryan, you're there all day. You're very annoyed. You see an orthopedist, you see a dentist, and so forth. I get a call the 1st of December that Ryan had hepatitis. And I thought, that's why he's been so sick. Well, my nightmare was just beginning. He turned 13 on December the 6th, and a few days later, he got off the school bus. He come in the house, and he said, Mom, you got to do something. He said, I can't even get off the school bus without being tired. He said, we had to run a lap today at school, Mom, and the teacher got real upset because I couldn't finish. He said, Mom, I don't understand what's going on with me. A few days later, the fever started. He started running 103, 104 fever. They put him in the hospital, and he was diagnosed with pneumonia in both lungs. They treated him for bacterial pneumonia, and he never got any better. Finally, they decided he needed to be seen at Riley Hospital for Children. In the emergency room, Dr. Kleinman met me. He said, we feel Ryan has TB, cancer, or possibly AIDS. I didn't know anything about AIDS except that I remember people on TV, it seemed like they had just wasted away. They were dying. And I thought, well, my son can't have AIDS. They ruled out TB, and Dr. Kleinman said, we need to do a biopsy. I said, Ryan's not supposed to have any surgeries. He said, this child's going to die if we can't find out what's wrong with him. So I consented. They gave him factor, and he went into surgery. They took 2 inches out of his left lung. There was no AIDS test at that time. They sent the results to Denver, Colorado, where the results came back that he had pneumocystis, which meant he had AIDS. Dr. Kleinman said, your son has AIDS. And I said, how can my son have AIDS? He said, well, we think this might be the tip of the iceberg. And sure enough, that's when in '85, they started bringing in all the hemophiliacs and found out that 80% of them was all HIV infected. So this just happened to be the start of a big mistake as far as in the pharmaceutical field. But Dr. Kleinman, I can remember as a mom just not believing it. I really believed in miracles, I believed in cures, and I just could not imagine my son going to die. I said, how long do you think he might have? He said 3 to 6 months if we can get him over what he has now. I said, I just can't believe this is happening to our family. I said, I want to know all there is to know about this disease. He said, there's not a lot of information out there. I said, don't tell me that. I said, every cough, every fever, I'm going to worry about whether I'm doing enough and what to do and when to do it. He said, I know you're a strong Christian lady, but you have to remember the people that are fighting this disease and trying to do something about it is mostly the gay community. He said, I'm going to give you the number of AMFAR. And he said, you can do what you like. I didn't hesitate at all. I wanted my son to live. I called AMFAR, and on the other end of the line, Ryan was still in the hospital. And I said, I want to know everything that you guys know. And he said, well, we're finding out here in New York far sooner than anywhere else what works and what doesn't work. So he said, we'll keep in close contact. Terry Byrne told me, he said, if you have any questions or concern, you call me. Well, I had nobody to talk to about this disease. So I had the best friend in the whole world by a gentleman by the name of Terry Byrne. I can remember Dr. Kleiman said, we need to tell Ryan what is wrong with him. I said, Ryan's really smart. I said, I don't know how much he knows about AIDS. He said, well, we don't want him hearing about it from somewhere else. I said, well, people can't talk. He said, people do talk. He said, people in the lab and so forth, this is the first of its kind. He said, we don't want Ryan hearing about it from someone else. So he was off the respirator. He was doing better. He had been out in the hospital for about 6 days at that time. And I went into his room and I said, Ryan, I was just testing the waters. Really, I didn't know what I was going to say. But I said, you know, Ryan, you've been really sick. He said, yes. I said, they say you have AIDS. He said, am I going to die? I said, Ryan, we're all going to die someday. We just don't know when. He said, let's pretend I don't have it. I said, Ryan, we can't really do that because we have to take all these precautions to keep you from getting sick. My daughter Andrea said, Mom, that's not what he means. And Ryan said, see, Mom, she knows me better than you. He said, I don't want every time somebody enters a room to talk like poor Ryan, he's dying. I just want to go ahead and go on with my life, okay? Here was a 13-year-old kid that grew up overnight. I went in his room a few days later. He said, Mom, sit here by me. I said, what's the matter? He said, nothing's the matter. He said, Mom, the Lord just came and spoke to me. And I said, what? He said, the Lord just came and spoke to me. And I said, well, what did he say? He told me I had nothing to fear, that I was going to be taken care of. I said, Ryan, I said, you sure it wasn't a doctor or nurse dressed in a white gown or something? He said, no, Mom. I said, well, what did he look like? He said, he sure didn't look like that picture at home on my wall. But there was this inner peace with that Ryan. He said, Mom, I'm not afraid to die. When I die, I know I'm going to a better place. I saw a kid take his faith. We did not know how many days we had. We did not ever dream that we were going to have 5.5 years. Ryan had a T-cell count of 25, which was a death sentence at the time. It never went above 25, but Ryan lived 5.5 years, which everybody says is almost impossible. But Ryan, he said, I'm going to go to school. He said, I want to go back. I just want to be a normal kid again. And little did we know how hard that was going to be. But we were able to leave the hospital finally. Ryan was so excited, and we were so excited because we never knew whether we were all going to see home again. And I had to go back to work. It was very fortunate because I worked for General Motors. I had great insurance. Because of Ryan's hemophilia and because of AIDS, we were one of the fortunate ones that, the medical bills was not a hassle for us. But I had to keep that job at General Motors, which everybody says, well, don't you miss not being at home with him all the time? And I said, well, yeah, but my mom went on nights. She worked at General Motors too, just so somebody would be with Ryan. Like during the day, she was with Ryan, and then we had Ryan at night. But Ryan started eating. He started eating us out at house and home. He started getting really healthy, and he kept calling me every day at work. He said, Mom, I'm so bored. I said, I know, hon. I said, Mom will be home at 3:30. Andrew will be home at 4. He said, no, Mom, I'm just so bored. And he called me every day, 2 and 3 times a day, just to kind of check in and just tell me how bored he was. He started gaining weight. Finally, he called me and he said, Mom, will you call the school and see if I can go visit? He said, they have pizza on Friday, and I really like the school's pizza. He said, maybe if I just saw some of my friends, I'd be okay. I called the school. Mr. Colby said, have you talked to the local board of health? I said, no. He said, I think you better talk to them. There's a lot of people have been complaining about the restaurant, eating in restaurants and so forth. And Ryan said, yeah, they're throwing away my dishes. He said, that's just ridiculous. He said, they're washed, and that's all there is to it. He said, I wouldn't eat off of them either if they wasn't washed. So, he kind of dealt with humor, too. He kind of put humor into a lot of things that he had to deal with that was kind of negative or people making fun. So we kind of put it off a little bit. They were talking about putting a quarantine sign on our door and all this, and they said, no, Indiana was the first state to have to issue guidelines for police and firemen and ambulance and so forth for blood spills, body fluids, so to speak. So we kind of dealt with it, and Ryan just kept getting better and better. He looked so good, and he'd passed the 3 months mark by then. And I thought, I pray, and every day we thank the Lord for another day, not ever realizing how many we would have. But that was one thing we always did. Thank you, Lord, for another day. And just to kind of make it different sometimes, he'd go, thank you, Lord, for another day. He just kind of changed it up a little. But every night before he went to bed, he was saying, thank you, Lord, for another day. So he continued to get better, and finally he called me again in May, and he said, Mom, call the school. He said, call Mr. Colby. He said, I'm kind of smart. He said, I don't want to take the 7th grade over again, Mom. He said, I'm kind of smart. Maybe I could take a test. That way I could stay with my class. Mr. Colby said, well, I think it would be best if Ryan took the 7th grade over again. He said, the school board's going to vote in July whether to allow Ryan in school for next year. Just be patient. Everybody was always telling me to be patient. The school board voted not to let Ryan in school, but we did not know it till the end of July. CBS Morning News, it went over the wires, and overnight, Ryan became a media story. Media camped out at our front door. I mean, it was horrific to see, but the media was the best friend of Ryan White, because they educated people through the media. And when people did not want to hear about AIDS, we thought it would take one court hearing. There was an attorney from Lafayette, Indiana, that called and said, Ryan White, do you really want to go to school that bad? And Ryan said, yes. He said, it could get ugly. Ryan said, I can take it. He said, Ryan White, if you really want to go to school that bad, I'm going to get you there. Well, then we thought it would take that one court hearing because we had the CDC, the NIH, we had all these famous infectious disease doctors testifying. But at that court hearing, local doctors testified that they wouldn't let their kids go to school with Ryan, and they wouldn't treat Ryan if he'd been a patient of theirs. So you had the medical community even not knowing and not wanting to put their name on this disease called AIDS. Ryan said, yeah, they're wanting 100% guarantees. He said, there are no 100% guarantees in life, Mom. But he said, I'm not going to give anybody AIDS. So then we fought this. The longer they fought Ryan to keep him out of school, the more famous became. But the more uglier it became. We got a lot of hate mail. We had a bullet hole shot through our window. I went out one Friday, and Friday at General Motors, you can't wait to go get your paycheck and go cash it. And all 4 of my tires were slashed. We were the talk of a radio talk show. And I can remember just kind of trying to understand people, but at the same time just being so upset as a mother. I remember getting this one letter. It said, Dear Mrs. White, you are such a puke. We are so sick of seeing your fat, ugly face on TV. You do not love your child, or you would not let your child go to school, kill other kids, and be killed himself. Signed, a concerned citizen. Then I seen how rough it was for Ryan and our family. It was people tried to make Ryan, the attorney for representing the school, trying to make Ryan and Andrea ward of the court by saying I was an unfit mother. And that was when I thought, this is not going to stop. This is, I'm really fearful now. We even at church, which I taught Sunday school for 10 years, 2 to 4-year-olds. And the church was really, really something to me. I'd went there to the church my whole life. I mean, everybody knew I raised everybody's kids, as they were growing up for 10 years. And I thought, of all people that would always be there, it would be my church. But I can remember going to church with Mom. We always went with my mom and dad, too. And Ryan had this wispy cough. And it was from his pneumocystis. And every time he coughed, people would turn around and look in disgust. I mean, and kind of shake their head. And I can remember leaving, and it was on Easter Sunday, this was. And I remember my dad, or nobody would shake Ryan's hand. And then I can remember my dad said, I will never come back. I lost faith in the church, but I never lost faith in God and Jesus Christ as my Savior. I never lost. I had to question him for several times because of everything that was happening and how cruel people could be. But at the same time, I never questioned my faith. And I can remember us getting to do a lot of things. A lot of celebrities came forth. And one of the things that we were asked was, there was this first ever AIDS benefit in New York. And Terry Byrne called me and said, is there any way you can get here? And I thought, oh my gosh, yes. It'll show that these celebrities don't want to get AIDS, and it'll be a great educational tool. Well, Ryan went on Good Morning America, and David Hartman asked him, he said, Ryan White, who are you looking forward to meeting at this AIDS benefit? Ryan said, meeting Elton John, definitely. I was kind of shocked. I thought Elton was a little weird. Now, Elton knows I say this, everybody. So, because he's my best friend in the whole world now. So always be careful what you say, because it can come back to haunt you too. But Ryan come into the green room, and I can remember asking Ryan, I said, Ryan, why did you say Elton John? He said, because he's not afraid to be different. Out of the mouths of kids. We went to the event. Elton John had jet lag, did not attend, but on the way in the limo furnished by Good Morning America the next day, the phone rings in the limo. And Ryan and Andrea and I look at each other like, who even knows we're in here? But the driver nodded for us to pick up the phone, and it was Elton John. He said he wanted to meet our family. And we flew to LA. We stayed 5 days, and we ended up staying 5 more days with Elton. And we definitely he became a part of our family, and we became a part of his. But there was many celebrities that came forth, and Ryan continued to educate people through the public and through the media. The media loved Ryan, and they said, we see a person on camera and off camera, and Ryan was always the same. So one of the things I felt like they were telling his story, and they said, we see a kid that just smiles. I said, Ryan, don't you get mad at people? Don't you get angry at people at what's going on, all the things people are saying? And he said, Mom, they're just trying to protect their own kids like you're trying to protect me. He said, when you're afraid of something, he said, you're going to be afraid of it. He said, that's why we have to continue to educate people. So I saw Ryan just, never get angry. And that's what I think the media was hoping he would get angry, because the parents' groups were all angry. But one of the last things right before, Ryan won the right to go back to school, and it was 3 weeks left to go in school. And I knew he could handle himself, because he'd handled himself with the media and everybody. And he'd grown up so much, but he called me at work, and I said, what's the matter? He said, well, when I got to school, the outside of my locker was marked fag and other things. He said, when I opened my locker, somebody's been in my locker, and they wrote all over my folders and books. He said, Mom, I can't take these things to class or everybody will laugh. I said, Ryan, give me the phone. Give me the principal. He said, Mom, he's at another school. I said, Ryan, there has to be somebody there. He said, Mom, there's a secretary here. I said, give me the secretary. The secretary got on the phone. I said, I've never called a press conference in my life, and that school is called many. I said, you have 5 minutes to get him a new locker and new folders, or I'm going to have every media in the country at that school. I had just had it. I could not take it no more. I thought we fought and fought for over 9 months. We went to all these court hearings, evaluated, and Ryan calls me back about 10 minutes later. He said, Mom, everything is cool. He said, I got a new locker, I got new folders. He said, really, Mom, everything is okay. But because he won the right to go back to school, 3 movie companies wanted to do a story about his life. We got $25,000 up front in a check. I looked at it for 2 weeks. I didn't want to cash it, for somehow I wanted to see if I could make our life better. Meanwhile, Ryan was diagnosed in 84, and this was 87. So I just thought, secretly I was praying and hoping that somehow, some way they're going to be wrong. I still thinking somehow his body's going to take over, or God's going to do his miracle work. But anyway, we ended up moving to Cicero, Indiana. And it's only about 30 miles away from Kokomo, Indiana, where this all happened. And didn't know whether we were going to have the same situation. But when the rumors were flying that we were moving into the neighborhood, Jill Stewart, who was president of the student body, she went to school and asked the principal, Tony Cook, she said, let's make Ryan White welcome here. So the kids did mass education. The student council got all involved. They educated the students, and the students went home and educated the parents, which was in Kokomo, it was the opposite. The parents got the information, but it was the wrong information. So the first day we moved in, 5 kids stopped by the house and introduced themselves to Ryan, so he would know somebody. 3 mothers stopped by and said, if you ever need anything, we're here for you. One is still my very best friend today. But Terry called me again. At that time, you were hearing about all these drugs that might be coming up. And by golly, you're trying to research, and then there'd be another one, and then there'd be another one, and then there'd be another one. But Terry Byrne called me and said, we're having this testing about a drug called PHA-23. Is there any way you can bring Ryan to Roosevelt Memorial Hospital? I'm like, oh my God, you're there. I mean, every effort you have, you are trying to find something. So we flew to New York, and Ryan went to Roosevelt Memorial Hospital. And this gentleman came up to Ryan. He said, oh my gosh, you're Ryan White, aren't you? And Ryan, not never knowing whether you want to admit who you are or not, Ryan said yes. He said, they found 12 tumors in me. He said, I haven't been diagnosed with AIDS yet, but they're pretty sure that's what I have. He said, I want to thank you for all you've done for people with AIDS. The gentleman turned around, walked away, and Ryan said, Mom, I'm the only one that knows what he's really going through. We're fighting the same disease. He said, Mom, once you have AIDS, you're just like everybody else who has AIDS. You're fighting to stay alive. He said, we're all in this together. He goes, Mom, we're fighting for everybody with this disease. So it was very, very important for Ryan to try to educate people and to make AIDS a disease, he said, instead of a dirty word. One of the last things that he went to proms, he went to dances, and he had kids even at West 57th Street was nominated for an Emmy by Sesame Street, and so they had to have a drawing. And for these kids to be in this mock classroom, all the kids sent back their permission slips. Ryan said, for the first time, Mom, I've got all these people fighting this disease with me. He said, I'm not fighting this disease alone anymore. Ryan ended up living 5.5 years, but the last event he did was we got a call from the Reagans, President Reagan, and they wanted to know if we would do this Oscar party for kids. They wanted Ryan to attend. Ryan said, we've never heard Reagan mention the word AIDS. He said, if he'll appear with me, I'm going to be there. So we flew to California. We went to the Oscar party. We did the Oscar party. And the next night, Ryan was starting not feeling well. We had to fly the red eye home, and Ryan entered the hospital for the last time. Elton heard that we had to fly back home, and he wasn't going to get to see us. So Elton flew right behind us. He flew back to the hospital, at Riley Hospital, and that's when Ryan entered the hospital for the last time. Just up and down. Some days were good, some days they finally put him in a coma to slow his body down and to hoping the meds would work. But it was just still up and go. We had a lot of hope, but we get a call from the hospital. Elton was doing everything at the hospital. He was taking all the cards. Flowers were coming in from all around the world. They were lining up the hallway, the corridors of the hospital. And he was a secretary. He really was. He was okaying any visitors that could come up. But he gets a call, and he said, Jeannie, I think you need to take this one. It was Senator Kennedy. Senator Kennedy had called the hospital They were having these first hearings on the CARE Act, a bill called the CARE Act. And Senator Kennedy started talking to me, and he said, you know, Ryan's a fresh face on the news with AIDS. The media is camped out at the hospital. He said, for the first time, he said, we have people caring about this disease now. With your permission, would it be all right if we named this bill the Ryan White CARE Act? And I said, well, that would be nice, not ever realizing how enormous that bill would become. And then Ryan got sicker, and I kind of even forgot about the bill. But Elton John was there, trying to do as much as he could at the hospital. But another person who's always been under a lot of controversy, Michael Jackson, he called the hospital, and he asked me if I could he wanted to talk to Ryan. I said, Michael, he won't be able to hear you. He's in a coma. He said, oh, no, he'll be able to hear me. He said, I know he will. Can you get a telephone line ran to his room? Well, Elton did. Elton got a telephone line ran to Ryan's room, and Michael Jackson calls, and Elton John is talking to Michael Jackson on the phone. I went over and put my arm around him, and I said, tears just started running down his face. I put my arm around him, and I said, what's the matter? He said, you know, with all the money that's in this room, we can't bring this boy back to life. It was a real realization to Elton. He'd been in every kind of situation, cocaine, alcoholic, bulimic. I mean, he had been tearing or destroying his life, so to speak. He had all the money in the world, and he could buy anything, but he didn't have his health. Elton entered rehab, and even to this day, he contributes his life being saved because of Ryan, because he entered rehab after Ryan passed away. After Ryan passed away, I felt like my traveling days, everything was over, because I used to always just follow Ryan. Ryan always spoke. I would just always supported Ryan. But then I get a call from Senator Kennedy again. He said, you know, we're having these hearings in D.C. We want you to come. I said, oh, I can't. I said, I'm not smart enough. I said, I'm an emotional wreck still. He said, well, this is a chance for us to make a difference. He said, please think about it. I said, you know, I don't know anything about the government. I don't know anything about the bill or anything. I said, I don't want to hurt the cause and more than help the cause. And he said, well, think about it. Well, then Terry calls me and my friends from MFAR. They said, please do this for us. Do this for us living with AIDS today. I said, Terry, I'm just afraid I will mess up. I said, Ryan did that, but not me. He said, please do this for us. And I still kept saying, oh, I don't think I can do this, Terry. Finally, Senator Hatch, the co-sponsor of the bill. Senator Hatch called me. He said, I'm not taking no for an answer. He said, I have 25 senators lined up for you. All we want you to do is be a mom. We're going to approach this disease a little differently. He said, everybody has a mom. For the first time, we're going to do something that is focusing on moms, because everybody that has AIDS has a mom. Just be a mom and tell these senators what it was like to watch your son live and die from AIDS. I tell you, I went to D.C., I spoke to senators, I told them about my life, and for the first time, I felt like I had a story to share too, of watching my son live and die from AIDS. And hopefully, one thing I felt when I went to D.C., everybody talked about numbers. I thought, no, you got to see the faces. You got to see the real people. With the best educational tool we have is by seeing actual stories and seeing real people fighting this disease. And that's what I wanted to focus on, the real people living with this disease. People say, how can you do what you do after losing your child to AIDS? You know I'm going to see Ryan someday soon. And he's not going to have hemophilia, and he's not going to have AIDS. Thank you. Thank you. I would like to say one more thing. You know, I wanted a miracle so bad. And I think miracles come in so many different ways, and sometimes we can't see them. Ryan was only supposed to live 3 to 6 months, but he lived 5.5 years. I know we always want more. No matter what, we always want more. But I think maybe I did get a miracle with Ryan living 5.5 years, and even helping everybody else live with AIDS, because I actually get to see their faces. And to be in this AIDS epidemic with Sandy Thurman for all these years, and we saw so many people dying early on, but to see people living now, you can actually go to conferences and see people living, you know, now. That is a true blessing, and it took everybody. Ryan might have been a face, but there were so many workers, you know, and so many people that got us to where we are today. And I want to say a big thank you to them.
Much, and we really appreciate. Thank you so much. I think we all need a moment for that, right? It was one of those inspirational moments. Yeah. So thank you once again. So still in the spirit of activism and human rights among faith leaders, I would like us to invite the next speaker. But before then, let me remind the ones that are online, kindly make sure you tweet, share your sentiments online, wave, say hi, put your questions online. And the hashtag is Faith to End AIDS. Kindly use that hashtag online, and let's keep on tweeting, let's keep on sharing our sentiments, let's keep on sharing the amazing news and messages that we have. So we are moving forward with this. So I would like to invite Kate Thompson, Head of the Community Rights and Gender Department at the Global Fund, to address us. Is Kate around? Yeah, so she'll be sharing. This is a recorded session. It will be shared online. So let's hear from Kate.
Greetings, friends and colleagues. I'm Kate Thompson, Head of the Community Rights and Gender Department at the Global Fund to fight HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. It's a pleasure to join you all at this Interfaith conference, though I regret that I cannot be with you in person today. Allow me to start by appreciating the event's strong focus on taking action to overcome stigma and discrimination and to provide compassionate care for all. And my thanks to the co-organizing of this pre-conference. Since the early days, through their strong presence in and links with communities on the ground, as well as their broad networks of health facilities, faith-based organizations have played and continue to play a critical role in the HIV response, as well as to counter the concurrent epidemic of stigma and discrimination. Many participants in this pre-conference have been working together over many decades now to ensure that faith-based and rights-based approaches align for effective evidence-informed interventions to reduce stigma, discrimination, and other human rights-related barriers. Baseline and midterm assessments carried out in 20 countries through the Global Fund's Breaking Down Barriers, or BDB initiative, have reinforced the evidence in understanding that religious leaders and faith initiatives have an important role to play in reducing the misconceptions that fuel stigma and discrimination, and that they are key partners in promoting respectful and compassionate responses and reducing stigma and discrimination in community and health settings. However, our findings have also shown that there are still too many instances where religious and traditional leaders are not properly capacitated or supported to act as the progressive leaders of change that they can and should be. Sadly, programs to leverage the strengths of FBOs and interventions to address stigma and discrimination through the engagement of religious leaders often still remain sporadic and uncoordinated and limited in scale in many countries. There have been many notable efforts to engage religious and cultural leaders on issues affecting key and vulnerable populations, and to more systematically enlist their support to address stigma and discrimination. The recent Breaking Down Barriers midterm assessments documented the importance of partnerships and coordinated efforts for effective, comprehensive responses, and they captured some of those efforts. For instance, outspoken condemnation of attempts to repress key and vulnerable populations and joint work to enhance access to care. The critical role of religious and traditional leaders throughout the BDB countries in addressing gender-based violence, and the sensitization of religious and traditional leaders on issues regarding human rights, gender equality, and key populations in most BDB countries. My colleague Alexandrina is going to be joining you tomorrow and providing more background on some of these emerging examples of impact that we found. National strategic plans for comprehensive responses to human rights related barriers were developed as part of the BDB initiative through multi-stakeholder processes, including the engagement of FBOs. The plans have set out important country-level commitments for joint action to address stigma and discrimination, with full recognition of the critical role of traditional and religious leaders. We are seeing that interventions to reduce stigma, discrimination, and other human rights-related barriers included in Global Fund grants for the current 2020 to 2022 cycle acknowledge the need for comprehensive interventions across multiple settings and the important contributions of all partners, including communities and faith-based organizations. The global response to HIV changed the path of global health, inspiring unprecedented global solidarity and collective action of communities in all their diversity, governments, donors, and partners. The current COVID-19 crisis and global response further represents an opportunity to put front and center the recognition of health-related rights in order to ensure equitable, non-discriminatory access for all. And in our responses to HIV, TB, malaria, and COVID-19, we must ensure we leave no one behind. We must commit to protecting everyone, everywhere, from the deadliest infectious diseases. And we must make stigma and discrimination history and strengthen the community systems and responses that are so critical to ending all epidemics. And we must address human rights violations where they occur, knowing from experience that protecting the most vulnerable protects everyone. Communities of faith are essential and influential partners in promoting human rights and ending stigma and discrimination. The Global Fund is committed to continue working with and strengthening our collaboration with communities of faith to protect human rights and address stigma and discrimination. The Global Fund's 7th replenishment fundraising campaign aims to raise at least 18 billion to get back on track in the fight against HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria, and to support partners, faith partners included, to fight for what counts. I want to end by acknowledging the enormous body of work and incredible dedication of everyone participating in this pre-conference. Collectively, let's seize this opportunity to learn from each other and work jointly across continents and diseases for healthy lives for all, and to make the world a more equitable place and free from stigma and discrimination. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was from Kate Thompson as we speak about an HIV world. So I would like to invite our next speaker. This is someone we all know, Father Rick Bauer, who's been working with us for the longest period of time, HIV activism, and I happen to have known him from Kenya as well. Welcome, Father Rick. Karibu.
Asante sana, what a delight to be here. Jeannie, what a delight, and this is Connections. As a very young priest and a new social worker, the very first grant I wrote and received was the Ryan White CARES Act for the Diocese of Salt Lake City Catholic Charities to provide those services. So I never want to follow you on a stage again, but thank you. Thank you so much. What a pleasure and what a delight to be here, both physically and virtually, as we gather for this Interfaith Preconference to the International AIDS Conference in 2022. Our topic, taking action to overcome HIV stigma and discrimination, is hugely important. It's critical and it's essential to ending HIV as a public health threat. But as I get older and grayer, one of the things I've learned is that saying yes to God and grace and love is a lot easier and far more enjoyable than constantly saying no to sin. But make no mistake about it, discrimination, stigma is a sin. It's always contrary to the will of our Creator. But saying yes to God, to grace, is to focus on comprehensive, compassionate care for all. And I'd like to suggest this morning that the way that we can do both is to embrace a radical theology of hospitality. Karibu, welcome, bienvenido, bienvenue. I believe that God, the host of the world, calls us to transform a too often inhospitable world into God's own welcoming and hospitable image. The great spiritual writer Henri Nouwen wrote, "True hospitality accepts others on their own terms, not on ours. Hospitality is the gift and opportunity for the guest to find their own true, authentic self. In a world full of strangers, estranged from our histories, our families, our friends, our cultures, sometimes our faith, our churches, hospitality creates a space for the deepest expression of self and of God, where life can be lived, where true community can be encountered and celebrated and experienced. Because you see, hospitality isn't to change another. It's to create that sacred space where healing and change and wholeness can come about. Radical hospitality must be part of our clinical work. Prevention, care, treatment, advocacy, because part of our unique witness as faith-based health providers is that compassionate presence. Being 100% present to another. And that may be the most healing moment in a clinical encounter. My dear friends and colleagues, Nurse Betty Farrell and Dr. Christina Puchalski wrote, "Caring for the soul means that we are fully present in situations that we cannot always control, and patient as meaning and direction unfolds. Caring for the soul means that we see familiar things in new ways. It means listening to our patients rather than speaking. It means learning from those we care for rather than always teaching them. Caring for the soul means that we can make a difference in the life of others by our hospitality and our presence, and value that as much as the latest antiretroviral and clinical expertise. And caring for the soul finally means that we discover that healthcare is a front row seat on mystery. And sitting in that seat with our eyes wide open. I want to suggest that we can integrate this paradigm of radical hospitality right here, right now, in our table groups, online with each other, discussing in the main conference, and then take this theology of hospitality and bringing it back to our clinics, our homes, our communities, that we welcome as God welcomes. And then we will overcome HIV, stigma, and discrimination to provide comprehensive, compassionate care for everyone. I want to conclude with a prayer adapted from Prayer of Hospitality by Liz Dyer. And so we pause. Give us eyes and ears to see and hear the deepest needs of those we are called to serve. Give us hearts full of love for our neighbors as well as the strangers we will meet. Help us understand what it means to love as you love. Teach us to care for others in a way that strengthens those who seek healing. Fill us with generosity to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to the thirsty. Let us be that healing balm to those who are weak and lonely and weary by offering hospitality, kindness, and compassion. Give us hearts of courage to love the unlovable as well as the lovely. Make the doors of our hearts, our clinics, our communities wide enough to receive all who need compassion and care and our service. Give us the wisdom to seek out and welcome those most in need of HIV counseling, care, and treatment. And help us, Almighty God, to welcome the stranger, the lonely, the afraid, the angry, the abandoned. And so welcome you in our midst this day. Amen.
And yes. So we're coming to the end of this session, and I would just like to sum up everything that has come out from this session. So, so much has been talked about regards to what we are doing here today in terms of stigma and just reducing the misactions that we've seen over the years. And from the speakers and our keynote speaker, I would just like to point out a few things that came out strongly and from this session. So to sum this up is that we need to continuously keep doing what we are doing because we're already doing it by ending stigma. As the faith communities and as the different stakeholders that we're here, let's keep on doing what we're doing because from the results, what was shared earlier by Matt, is that it is working. So let's keep doing that. Then we are already doing the thing that does not happen in the health sector history. We're already doing one thing that in the public health sector has never been done before. So let's keep on actioning on that. Then resources we need are with us. We have the resources with us. Let's utilize those resources. Let's use those resources to act on the actions that we have. Let's use the resources that we have to make the right decisions on what you're doing within our spaces. Then the power of fear. Are we preaching fear or hope? A question to go home with. Then one of the key things that came from the conversation from a keynote speaker is, I'm not fighting this disease alone. That's one thing I noted, and that means that we have been working together for the longest time. We have been partnering different people, and that means that this is not a one-man show. This is not a fight that one person can do alone. It means that we are all in this together. So I'm not fighting this disease alone. Let's keep that stick around us as well. Then let's create safe spaces. From Father Rick is let's create safe and compassionate spaces for us that we can work with and we can use within our spaces. And I'm going to just remind us that there's always hope, even when your brain tells you there isn't one. Yeah? So never give up someone I'm going to leave you with a quote. Sorry, I'm looking for it. Okay, that will be shared later on because it seems like, oh yes. So when we deny the story, it defines us. When we own the story, we can write a brave new ending out of it. So I would like us to just stand and give one heartfelt round of applause to our keynote speaker as we end the session, and we're going out for a break for 15 minutes, then we'll be back. Kindly let's stand. So thank you so much. I was your facilitator, Brian Otieno. We'll meet later on. Thank you so much. 15 minutes break.